Well, the demand back in the day almost wiped out Korea's native bear population, and now campaigners believe the coronavirus pandemic has shown the potential risks of using wild animal parts as medicine. Let's speak to our correspondent Laura Bicker now. Laura, you actually spoke to the farm owner and saw the conditions. What were they like there?
It was vile. It was vile. The first thing that hits you as you're walking up the hill towards this mass of rusting cages is the smell, because he's not cleaning any of the bear dung. He said he's just mostly given up. It is piled underneath the cages and there are flies everywhere. In cages that are no bigger than most people's kitchen are about 5 to 6 moon bears, and they're about 6 feet usually high. Some of them had limbs missing, many of them were missing fur. They were obviously poorly fed. The farmer said he has no funds to feed them, and he told us that he fed them leftover donuts from the nearby donut factory. So that's their diet. They usually would be feeding on fruit, vegetables. Obviously that's the kind of diet that they would usually have. They looked in very poor condition. It was the first time the animal rights group had seen them. This is one of the biggest farms in Korea, and even they were shocked at the condition.
Do you think the South Korean government is out of step with popular opinion on this now? I mean, in the light of coronavirus and the treatment of live animals and how you can kind of get this cross-pollination between animals and humans with various viruses, and as we just heard the farmer say, people are actually now getting their supplements from elsewhere, so the demand isn't there as much as it was.
Well, that's what campaigners and certainly people I've spoken to in South Korea feel, that there is no longer demand for bear bile. It used to be treated for a number of health issues, hangovers, liver problems, heart disease, that kind of thing. But since then, you know, modern Koreans want modern medicine. So that in many ways is good news. But the bad news is it's left over 450 bears on farms in limbo. Now, in South Korea, they changed the law so that it was only legal to kill the bears if you'd kept them for 10 years. In China, you can insert a catheter into a live bear and they basically milk the bile. They made that illegal, but they only went halfway, and campaigners feel it's not enough. They want the farms closed down and they want somewhere for these bears to go that they can finally be freed from the cages. Now, we did ask for some comment. We haven't heard from the South Korean government yet. People are signing petitions and they're also obviously campaigning to try to free what is Korea's native bear. And actually, the myth goes that the bear started was way back. Obviously, Korea was created by the moon bear, according to legend here. So she does have this kind of mythical quality about her, and yet here we see them behind cages.
And briefly, Laura, is there enough public opinion against this now, do you think, to force a change through government?
I think there's enough public opinion, but whether or not government is taking notice, especially in COVID times, it's hard to know. The good news is that they are conserving moon bears in Jirisan National Park, so some wild moon bears still exist, and the numbers have gone from 5 in 2004 to 69 today.
Laura, thank you. Our correspondent in Korea, there, South Korea, Laura Bicker.
Sudan's ousted former President Omar al-Bashir has gone on trial in Khartoum over the coup that brought him to power in 1989. His 30 years as the head of Sudan were a nightmare for many, including the singer and songwriter Mohamed Al-Tayeb. That was Sumud by Mohamed Al-Tayeb. It's about the killing of protesters just over a year ago. They were demanding democracy in Sudan. Those protests did overthrow Omar al-Bashir and brought in a new interim government headed by both civilians and the military. Mohamed was already a refugee living in Europe. Now, after the video of Sumud circulated in Sudan, Mohamed says he and his family faced threats, an indication perhaps of how much still needs to change in the country. Mohamed has been telling me more about how Sudanese security forces have gone as far as threatening his mother.
3 soldiers in a civil clothes came to my family house in Wad Madani, and they asked my mother to delete the video. My mother answered that we can't control that, and they said that we take this as a support for your son, and we will find them our way. I belong to a very simple Sudanese family. My mother still thinks that I will face jail or something.
So tell us about your situation then. You're a refugee in the Netherlands, is that right?
Yes, I'm a refugee in the Netherlands, and I felt more free to produce music here. But I'm not sure if I'm going to produce more of this type of music.
Your plan is to bring together musicians, Sudanese musicians who've had difficult experiences at the hand of the Sudanese security forces to produce music that way. Why is that important to you?
Actually, because they felt it. They were in detention and they had the same history what I had. And asking them to participate in this kind of music, they will do it with love. And we all have the good wishes for Sudan.
It's almost a year since the transitional government began in Sudan, that deal between the military and the civilian protesters. Has it changed the country, do you think?
In a positive way, people feel that it's a good thing will happen. But in the reality, we're still having the same mentality of the soldiers we had before the transitional government. Our problems in Sudan in the past is the security militias, the rapid support forces, the NISS, the army itself. The problem that we couldn't trust those people, and we are not trusting them for the future of Sudan.
How does a boy from a simple family from Wad Madani, as you describe yourself, come to be a refugee in the Netherlands?
I actually didn't know anything about the Netherlands before I came here. I'm a very simple person from Wad Madani who was never thinking about leaving Sudan or going to another far country. But I ended up here, and what I want to do now is to tell about my country more, and I think if people heard about what is happening in Sudan, it will help the civil government to be much stronger.
Why did you end up as a refugee?
Actually, in Omar al-Bashir timing, Sudanese musicians were struggling with their music. I left Sudan after I was jailed in Kober prison in 2018. I was jailed after a protest, and I stayed 4 months in Sudan, and then I left.
You say that you and many Sudanese are optimistic people by nature. What do you see about to be optimistic in your country right now?
Well, the people is the most important thing for me. The people are optimistic by nature, and we're just hoping that the future will be much better than what we had. We had a lot of hard times that always makes good lessons for the future, and we are learning from that.
A note of optimism to end there from the refugee and singer from Sudan, Mohammed Al-Tayeb.
Now, the extent of the spread of coronavirus across Africa is still a bit of a mystery. The amount of testing being done in most countries is a small fraction of the levels in the UK, Europe or the US. And for a long time, there were very few COVID deaths recorded across the continent. But the numbers, at least in some parts, are now starting to rise rapidly. And they're being fueled mainly by South Africa, which now has the 5th highest number of coronavirus cases in the world. It's recording more than 12,000 new infections every single day. Andrew Harding reports now from Johannesburg on what we can make out so far of the picture across Africa.
For the longest time, it seemed tantalizingly possible that this continent might be spared the worst. Strict lockdowns held fast, hospitals stood empty, and musicians urged Africans to keep their guard up. But today, here in South Africa, the dam has burst, with the number of infections already overtaking Britain.
The storm is upon us.
President Cyril Ramaphosa warning of the struggles ahead.